Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to a new 4D method meeting for a new year. This is the 4D user group. Today is January 19th of the good year 2022. This is meeting number 54 of the user group. On our agenda today, we'll be talking a little bit about what 4D method is, the user group. We'll chat a little bit about the 4D happy hour, 4D on tap. We'll be talking with Kirk Brooks and his efforts there. We'll get some 4D news from Jim and Louise, and we'll have just a quick review of the current version of 4D, the current R version anyways, that was just released, 4D v19 R3. We'll take a little bit of a look at the recent blog articles that came out in a storm of blog articles, that is, or a storm also, depending on where you are. And then we'll have our segment on the knowledge base, of note in the knowledge base, and Ad will be reviewing some of the recent articles that came out there. Then we'll have our special topic, keeping up with 4D's latest technologies. I'm always wanting to say keeping up with something else, and I'm not going to do it. It's a worthwhile endeavor by Chris Belanger. And then we'll talk about our next meeting on March the 2nd, 2022. So my name is Brent Raymond. I host and organize these meetings. The website where you can get information about the user group is 4DMethod.com. You can also email me at 4dmethod@gmail.com to say, perhaps give any feedback or suggest any topics, or also volunteer to present. The whole point of what we're doing here is to try to bring together a scattered community of developers and users of 4D applications and their development environments and whatnot. We use video conferencing for meetings to allow people to participate from anywhere. Just like everyone in the world now, we do this on Zoom. All the meetings are recorded for now going on lots of years, apparently. And they can be viewed again on our YouTube channel. Just check out 4D Method in YouTube and you'll find a few things. And what we're trying to do here is just to provide fresh new content and exposure for users and developers everywhere, to see what 4D is doing out in the world and what your friends are doing with 4D, and to share some stuff and get some news from 4D themselves, to see what's going on with the company and what's coming out new. There's always a storm of new features that I'm going back to the storm again, but a lot of new features coming out to talk about. So I'd like to invite everybody to, if you haven't had a chance for the spotlight, this is your group. Jump in and show off your application. If you're a developer or not a developer, it doesn't matter. Show your product, how 4D is playing a role in your life, or just some interesting things you've been working on. We've got a couple of open dates in this year. April 13th could be you. May 25th, anybody who has got some interesting stuff to share. Just take a look at the 4dmethod.com schedule at that link below, and see when you might be able to fit it into your schedule. We're always looking for great new content and just things to show off. So speaking of which, I wanted to just take the opportunity today, given that this week in the US anyways, we celebrated Martin Luther King Day on Monday. For anyone who's not familiar with him, he was a civil rights leader and activist who was assassinated in the 60s. So I figured it was as good a time as any to make a special invitation to anyone who isn't like most of us here, with the exception of Louise, mostly old white guys, to participate in the user group. It'd be great for our community to be a bit more diverse and not only have people like us, but also from different walks of life. And I like to think this group is welcoming and inclusive, but I'd like to find ways to actively support anyone who feels intimidated or in need of an extra hand at getting up to speed in 4D. I'd personally be happy to offer any assistance or give your efforts and story a focus one way or another. So anyways, please feel free to reach out and contact me or just to jump in the conversation. One relatively new way, at least since COVID in the past couple of years, to get in the conversation is the 4D happy hour, 4D on tap. So Kirk Brooks has been putting that together for, it was just kind of a way to chat once we were all in quarantine, but it's become a regular thing. Kirk, would you like to say a little bit about your efforts with the happy hour?
Thanks, Brent. I would, and congratulations on the really tremendous success of 4DMethod here. It's
thank you.
Really quite, it's been a big boon to the community. And as you pointed out, the happy hour started as sort of a reaction to not having any social time in the when the lockdown set in 2020. So initially that was really just it. We focused just on talking and socializing and literally sharing a beer together, at least across the Zoom. And since then it's pretty much continued. I think I haven't been at every single meeting because travel sometimes, but I think at least 2 or 3 people have shown up every Friday since then. It is a Zoom hangout. It is the link there at the bottom of the slide there. It gives you the link to the Zoom link. It's a static link. It's always there. You can join really anytime it's that I'm not using the Zoom. It's open. I did just recently grab the 4dhappyhour.com domain. Brent inviting me to say a few words inspired me to think, well, I guess it's time now. We could make this a little more official. I should have that website up in within a week or so, and that'll perhaps make it a little easier for you to find it when you want to. The time is 3:30 Pacific Standard Time every Friday. That unfortunately does make it a bit of a late evening for folks in Europe. On the other hand, Wayne joins us from Australia pretty frequently with coffee in hand, or we're out on a walk. And for those of us here in in the time zone, it's Friday. It's what we're doing. And I invite you to stop in there. As far as what do we do, and just looking at the faces here on the screen, I mean, a whole lot of you have dropped in at one time or another, and a number of you are the guys that are always there. So let me invite you to comment on just drop a comment in the chat about what you found particularly useful for it. What I think we do best is, first of all, we love to screen share. So, this is the place where you can come with a question, with an issue, with something that, maybe you've even been posting about on Discuss, but, it's just hard to sometimes convey that even with screenshots. And it's, when you can just go someplace and have some people look at it and suddenly notice how other things are impacting whatever the thing you think is the problem is. We're good. This is a great place to do that. There's really actually not very many places I think you can just pop in and say, hey, how does this work? Or what do you guys think about this? Or on the other hand, it's also a lot of fun when you have something that you worked out that you just want to share and say, hey, take a look at this. I finally got this to work. And one of the things I've noticed about this too is that So for me personally, I have yet to go through, any kind of screen share or interaction with like that, and not come away with at least one thing that I hadn't seen before. I've been doing 4D a long time, as have a lot of the people there, but you know what? There is so much to know and so many different ways to put things together within 4D and get things accomplished within 4D. It's, no one is going to know it all. And this is another place where just, a nice low key way to look at other people's work, look at how other people do work is really cool. The other thing we do there, this is a place where developers can talk about being a developer. And this is something that's actually fairly unique, I think, that outside of social gatherings at the summit, there's really no other place I'm aware of that you can just show up and say, so what are you guys doing to find clients these days? Or how are you doing your billing? Or how do you bill for this? Or how do I set up a server? Or how do I get this going? 4D, whenever you have 3 or 4 developers gathered together, a fifth opinion can always be found. So, it's not that anybody has the answer, but it's certainly just a place to talk things over and get some ideas. So, how do you get there? As I said, the link to one of the discuss posts will take you there. The website will be coming up soon. And then frequently I'll put a post on discuss the day of and just remind folks that it's there. So that's the 4D happy hour. Everybody's invited, regardless of the where you are in 4D, regardless of really what you want to talk about 4D. And I just personally invite you all to be there. I've really enjoyed meeting developers or having a chance to interact with developers, sort of, at least virtually like this. For example, this is the first time I met Chris, who's going to be presenting later, or talked to him. And it's, I appreciate actually being able to put a face and a personality and a voice to the things that I read on Discuss, for example, because that just makes it a lot enriches the experience for me. It makes it easier for me to read that person. So that's 4D happy hour once more. Thank you, Brent, and I hope everybody will stop in at least once.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk. It's a real, I think it's definitely filled in a gap of something that was definitely needed in our community, sort of very much more informal than like the 4DMethod meetings where we have slides and programs and like that. It's not that there is not a topic established to discuss. I mean, like in one of the meetings, we went through a full exploratory test of working with Git and doing Git pull requests and all that, and it's just really valuable stuff to discuss, but in a much more informal way to get together and hang out. So really awesome. So anyways, 4D happy hour. Hope to see everyone there. Hope to make it there myself. So
again.
Yeah. Again, right. So all right, well, thanks, Kirk.
You bet.
So now over to Jim and Louise at 4D to talk a little bit about what's going on with 4D, the company.
Hey, Hello. Brent, I'm going to let Louise go first.
Okay.
But before she starts, I wanted to just mention something about Louise. As most of you know, she's our field marketing manager here in the US, but Louise was trained and at our corporate headquarters in France. And she spent a long time there in anticipation of coming to California, because that was part of the job, that she would come to California. But excuse me, with COVID and visa issues and everything, it took her a while to get here, but she's now here. So she's now living in Mountain View, I believe,
Yes,
And
that's
yeah,
right.
which is close to our office in San Jose. So as an introduction, Louise, take it away, please.
Thank you very much, Jim. So yes, I'm so glad that I'm actually now here in the US enjoying the life here. I don't know if there is many people here from San Francisco, but I've already been a bit around San Francisco, Santa Cruz. I also went to my first game yesterday to see the Warriors who won. So that's pretty nice. I really enjoyed it. It was really, really nice. It's like a big show. We don't have that in France. So anyway, it's just part of the exchange, and it's super nice to be able to have this experience here. And so now talking about 4D, the latest news I want to share with you is that we will have our part 3 webinar. It will be next week. I will be starting to send you communication on this. I think I will start that tomorrow. So you will be able to, as always, just click on the button and then have it in your agenda, and meet us next week too. And what else I had? Oh, so then we also made a video for you for the new year. So if you want to have a look, here is the link on the slide. I will also put it right now in the chat if you want to go directly on YouTube, but after the meeting, because we want you to keep focused here for now. But we made this nice video about everything that actually happened in 2021. We had the blast. We had to manage COVID and everything. So, for example, we had the wall tour online. We had many Zoom meetings. So it's a different way of having the relationship with everyone, but we were happy that we all managed to do it well. So anyway, this is a video just to have a quick overview of what happened in 2021 with us together. So yep, that's it for my part. So now it's for you, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Appreciate that. So first off, from the entire team at 4D, I want to wish you all a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year. It's great to be in the first meeting of 2022. It looks like there's a lot of attendees here, more than normal, which is fantastic. We always appreciate being invited to these meetings, getting the opportunity to discuss what's going on at 4D, and thank you, Brent and Ed, for making these meetings possible. And we're looking forward to Chris's presentation on keeping up with 4D's latest technologies. As you all know, as developers, our technology is changing so quickly, especially with the new features in V19, that this is going to be a very timely topic. So we're all looking forward to that. From the business side of 4D, we're wrapping up an incredible year in 2021, planning for 2022. I mentioned in our November 4DMethod meeting that we were in the midst of one of our best years ever from a revenue perspective in 2021. And now that the year is closed and our books are closed for that year, I can tell you that I've been at 4D for 22 years now, and 2021 was our best year ever. So a lot of it had to do with you guys and women who are our 4D developers. So thank you all for that. It was our best year, not only in terms of revenue, but also percentage growth from the previous year. So it was really an amazing year for us. And it was true not just for 4D Inc. in San Jose, but for most of our subsidiaries as well, globally. So thank you again for all the work that you as 4D developers do. We really appreciate it. And as a result of that, we're growing our team at 4D, which is always a good sign. We're hiring more people here. which is fantastic. So thank you for that. From the technical side, we continue to roll out quarterly feature releases that Brent will be talking about, with V19R3, of course, being the current release. And for those of you who follow the feature releases, you know that when we release a new R version, we go to the beta of the next R version almost the same day or the day after. But right away, we start rolling out the beta with the features that are in that. So now it's V19R4 beta. And you can see the new blog postings that come out kind of en masse when we release a new beta of an R release. Our people who do these blog posts for us are kind of getting these together. And then when the beta comes out, they kind of go out there all at once. So right now, I think there's 20 new blog posts about V19R4 beta, which is pretty amazing. And then for those of us who've been with 4D for a long time, some of the amount of features now in an R release is almost what we used to see in a new version release. It's crazy great to see all these new features coming out so quickly. And if you're not using R releases and you're still using the LTS versions or long-term support versions of 4D, of course, those are updated as well with hot fixes and .x releases as well there. And yeah, so as long as we have this slide up about the holiday video, I just wanted to point out the one at the bottom right there, that we hosted 18,000 Zoom meetings.
I was going to mention that seems like a lot.
No, it's true. I saw the stats, and this is just what we hosted. So we were in a lot more of those that our customers or clients or other people hosted for us. So 18,000 is a lot. This is global, of course, not just the US. So, but that's a lot. And it's become a tremendous tool for us. Of course, we would all like to be having in-person events like the summit or whatever, but the Zoom meetings are really a close second, I think. It has allowed us to become closer to our customers than ever before. It's so easy to just pop into a Zoom meeting, start one up, and see someone's face there and get work done quickly. It's really been a boon for our business. And so we use that tool a lot. I think everybody at 4D has an account now. So we're keeping Zoom in business, but it's been really good for us. And yeah, so I think that's about it for me. As Louise mentioned, please do view this video when this meeting is over. Our marketing team spent a good deal of time putting this all together, and there's some really interesting stats in there. Don't click on the link now, but when the meeting's over. So thank you, Brent. That's it for me, and appreciate the time.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Thanks, Louise. No, it's a nice video, but as Jim mentioned, it's they've been coming out with new features at a really breakneck pace, and that's something that we try to keep up with in these meetings. It's not always easy, but and that's something that Chris will talk a little bit about in his segment today. But first, we'll just mention a few of the new features in R3 that was just released. The computed attributes in Orda, which is really great and ought to add a lot of flexibility to people's applications in just a really new way to use your data structure and to obscure some things that and clean up your code, put it in the data structure. Classes, iOS and Android. I mean, geez, that's those are also topics in themselves. The new features for 4D Mobile. As I mentioned last time, one of my favorite features, if you could call it that, but accessing method parameters that are not passed, just as something that might have been a little bit annoying at first to not be able to do that, but now they've made it so that if you do reference a parameter that wasn't passed, that it won't give an error. But if you haven't experienced that, then you'll appreciate it when you do. But 4D for iOS, interacting with native Apple apps, 4D for Android, USB debugging, both of those environments really moving forward very quickly. I'm very excited to try and introduce some mobile apps for us at the museum in Chicago. The bcrypt algorithm for passwords, again, that's really great for keeping your system safe. It's an algorithm that takes a little bit more time than most hashing algorithms and whatnot, so that people can't brute force break into your systems and try and just try different passwords. It takes too much time to do that. And dark mode development on Mac OS. So R3 is here, and we'll talk a little bit more about the plethora, the laundry list of great stuff in R4, given that most of the latest blog articles are really R4 focused or specific to R4. So digging into it here, and R4 itself, like Jim said, I mean, maybe in the olden days, this would have been a major release itself, a full numbered release. There's so much in it, but in this case, it's an R release. So these are all articles, but they're also features. High DPI on Windows, support for high resolution screens for anybody who has, even a big screen up in their office of metrics and stats about their system. I know that Sweetwater, as we've seen, has had some really interesting metrics that they are able to keep an eye on throughout the day, or just other being able to use the latest display hardware with 4K displays. You can now do that on Windows. It really the article talks not only about the fact you can do that, but then there's also some things you want to check on before you release it with that enabled. It's a what do you call those? It's an option that you can turn on anyways. Preference, compatibility option. Then another really a feature with a lot of potential, launch an external process asynchronously. It's talking about the 4D system worker class. You're able to farm out jobs to that worker that get called using launch external process in the command line. Just incredibly powerful, and I'm sure we're all just sort of shaking out how we can use that in our own systems. Just enormous potential with that feature alone. But moving on, Orda, say hello to aliases. Hello. There's just really good parts in that article about how to flatten a table using aliases. Just obscure all of your chains of relationships. If you have quite a large data structure, you can make all of those relationships collapse into one, basically like a calculated attribute, but in this case, it's more for easily navigating the data structure and relationships. So you can flatten the table, as I say, or hiding the N to P relationships. If you have like a relational table stepping through to other entities in your data structure, you can just put an alias on it and it looks like a field itself. Another just awesome feature that I am excited to take advantage of. Tag your comments, a feature by developers for developers. So that means most of you basically helped design this feature for that they were able to get into R4. You can now add comments, just marking code, marking it as a to-do item, a fix me item. There's different ways to do it. where it will throw a line in the method editor, a visible block, creating visible comment blocks, so to say. We already had comment blocks, but this is a special kind of comment that looks a little bit differently. And they also added the ability to quickly jump to different functions of a class, which also is quite handy because it will also show the comment tags. So you can jump to the functions in a class, but you can also jump to a to-do item or a fix me item. And it all shows up with their handy dandy little icons in the list. That is now a drop down in the method editor. So I think we're all going to really quickly come to rely on that feature for the work that we do. At least I know I will. And just a couple more items, huge things. Saving project source code without tokens for anybody who switched to project mode and who has gone to look at that and tried to edit your code and stuff, JSON files, project files in a text editor. It can be a little bit hard to read with all of the tokens. The tokens are for each command, there would be a colon and a number and whatnot, so that, well, there's multiple reasons, but now you can, as an option, turn that off so that you can more easily edit your code outside of the 4D environment. And that article discusses some tips and gotchas for working in, the 4D code is saved in English, I believe, but for working with 4D in other languages, there's a couple things you might want to check on before you save the code without tokens. And then on with improved productivity with object check syntax. This is nice. Basically, they've added compiler warnings for people that have their warnings turned on for object functions. So if you called a function wrong, say with a typo, or for how to instantiate a particular class, if you see in the snapshot there, if you misspelled the name of the class, or if you misspelled the name of the function, it will highlight that with a warning so that you can come back through and make sure that was what you really meant with your capitalization being wrong. And then finally, but not the least, the 4D language changes. The article's called "The Improvements You Requested Are Here." Well, this is just a litany of different code changes. They've added return, break, continue for breaking out of loops and returning values from methods and from class functions directly without it having to run through the rest of the logic. Short circuit evaluation, which let's see, what's the short circuit evaluation? That was the case where if you had a say a choose command where you were putting different values, it would evaluate everything in the choose command, and if one of them was null, it would error out. So it's allowing you to have a little bit more flexibility in your code when you say an element of a collection doesn't exist, it won't throw an error on you. And there's new comparators for that. There's, if you see in the lower left, the and symbol that evaluates truthiness, which was fun to see. Is there's truthy and falsy, which is an obvious Colbert reference, at least in my book, which is fun. But anyways, and moving on, ternary operators, compound assignment operators, just a whole bunch of different ways to write 4D code now. And, some things that obviously, people have been asking about in the past, no more I equals I plus 1. You can just do I, plus equals 1 or equals plus 1. Anyways, it's a few more syntaxes to learn, but just really great code for bringing the 4D language a bit closer to other languages, so that new developers can really pick it up and run with immediately. So R4 is just another huge release, and it's in beta right now, so check it out. But moving on to the knowledge base, again, the blog is just one place that you can go to for information about how to do 4D code, but there is a expansive amount of information in the 4D knowledge base as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Ad to discuss some of the latest tech notes that have been published there.
Thanks, Brett.
Yep.
Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. So, as you know, our knowledge base has been producing tech notes, at least 2 tech notes per month. And last year we did quite well in terms of number of tech notes and the topic that we have chosen. I think last user group meeting was my first time introducing the knowledge base to everybody. I think it's, everyone knows about it, but we'll keep the the tradition going for this time. And for this particular session, I want to highlight the last 4 tech notes that we did for the months of November and December. I think our focus now is trying to make sure that we not only introduce some of the features, but teach you or give you an idea on how to use some of those features. And we're trying to keep the context, as neutral, that is, for beginners, intermediate or advanced user can also understand the content. So the first one that we actually, one of the November tech notes is the 4D Pro off-screen areas. This is from Brian Yen. The concept is not new, but because 4D Pro came in as a replacement to 4D View, the evolution of the product has been slowly, ramping up until an R release, a particular version of R release in version 19. The off-screen areas are now fully functional. You can take advantage of the off-screen area in the way that you used to do with 4D View. Now, the techniques in the tech notes itself tends to be laid out as simple as possible. The idea is for you to understand how it works. And from there, you can pick it up and add your own logic and requirement into your own implementation. So it's quite nice to have something like this available now. The next one is deals with the notarization of an OEM application or a build and merge and compile and merge application. So for many years now, we are dealing with particular requirements through Gatekeeper on macOS. You have to do a sign and make sure that your application is notarized. An easy example would be something even as simple as the installer, right? You can't just drop a version of 4D in a zip file, download it from the web, and just put it anywhere you want. The system will detect it and make sure that the application is notarized and being approved to run on your system. So that's why, when you have an installer downloaded from 4D, it already has everything notarized. Therefore, all the application that has been installed are going to run without any kind of security notification. So this tech node actually covers how you would go about building your OEM application, making sure that you have a process that you sign your application properly in order for you to make it a deployable version of your application. So yeah, take a look. I know that there are a number of OEM applications out there that are going to be needing, or at least can use this tech node as a guideline on how you would proceed with your build process. Now, the next one would be the remote data store. This is the title is merging data from remote data stores into a local database. And the nice thing about our team is that not only the US team that is writing the tech notes, we get contribution from many of our colleagues from international as well. So Mehdi is one of our technical engineer in Morocco. He put together a tech note on how to sort of do a consolidation or merging your data from the remote data stores. If you haven't really used the remote data stores, really, really nice. It's a new way of pulling data from the data source running from using 4D server remotely. And this is through Order. Order has been around quite some times now, and the ability to be able to access not only within your own local database, but from the remote data store with the same exact way of your the code writing is quite nice. I'm using it myself in my own implementation and some of the work that we do through professional services. So yeah, this is sort of a basic or an introduction on how to do something like this that you can achieve through the remote data store in your own application. The last one is automating form changes in project mode. Many of you may find that there's a big difference between a binary application and project application, especially when we look at the form properties. Many things that are used to be inside of your binary application are now saved as an individual file on the disk. There are some good things that come out of it, meaning that you can actually making changes directly to those items. If you do it correctly, you will not create additional problem on your own side. But so what this tech node does is it gives you a way to perform sort of a batch operation. For example, if you need to make changes to a style of the button of all buttons to a certain style or property of those buttons, you can use the technique provided in this tech node to do a batch operation, because all of those items are now live inside of the JSON file on the disk. So we are able to manage all of those items manually, and even from outside of 4D also, but within the context of the 4D code itself, which is what this tech node does provide. It gives you a set of routine that allows you to call and make changes to some of those properties, one or more forms or one or more objects, whether it's the same form or multiple forms as a batch operation. So I think it's going to be quite useful in terms of speeding up your development process and kind of give you an easy way to manage some of those things in your application. So have a look, and as always, within each articles on the knowledge base, there is a comment area. Please feel free to comment. Whatever you find, whether you like it or not, you find some problem with it, or anything at all. But one thing I want to kind of point out is that comment area is not meant for sort of an open question for someone to come and answer. It's not so. It's not a forum, right? You can post a quick comment, and that's fine. But if any other comments that you would like or question that you would like answered, you can always send them. Post it on either on the forum or send them to us directly. We'll be happy to try to address some of those things. But just keep in mind that if you happen to have some something to say about the tech note, feel free to drop a comment in each of the asset note area at the bottom. Okay. And one last thing, because of the tech notes, for the new tech note anyway, for the first 12 months, they are available for partners only. So this is sort of the benefit of becoming a 4D partners. After the 12 months period, it will become public for everyone to be able to access to the tech notes. Okay, and I think that's it for me.
Well, thanks, Ad. Yeah, that's I think it's very important to recognize the amount of work that goes into these tech notes. I mean, each one of them have just a bunch of great information, especially if you're publishing anything on Macs these days, using built server clients. The article on the OEM application is great, and also the automating the form changes is just even if you don't intend to do that, it's a very interesting exploration of what's possible by manipulating the form JSONs on disk themselves. So yeah, lots of great stuff. There's tech tips, which are just little tips, and then there's tech notes, which are like theses. No, I don't know, but long papers. Before I stick my foot in my mouth. Anyways, but thanks, Ad. That's I appreciate your coming and highlighting those. So now on to our special topic. Today we have Chris Belanger joining us from his beautiful ski resort hometown in Canada called Fernie in British Columbia. It's just over the border from Glacier National Park in the States, and I guess just south, but kind of well south of Banff National Park. And if he asked, I would trade places with him. Looks like a very beautiful place. But anyways, Chris runs a company named Innovative Solutions, not to be confused with Tim Neville's company in the US. He started his career in 1983. Initially, he was using Symantec Pascal and a product called Mac4th. He taught early Macs how to speak in native languages. He even wrote a font editor to produce the Inuktitut and Dene fonts. He'll correct everything I just said, I'm sure. But in 1989, Chris started Innovative Solutions and got into 4D development using the legendary Silver Surfer version. To this day, Chris is an extremely active developer and can be often found discussing all aspects of 4D development in the 4D forum. We're happy to have him here today speaking with us about keeping up with 4D's latest technologies. Well, welcome, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I thought I'd just introduce myself a little bit, seeing as how I'm a new face to you. So as was mentioned, I actually learned about 4D back when it was codenamed Silver Surfer from a colleague. He was very excited about it. And when I started to look at it, I recognized that Laurent was a genius. When I started my little company, that would be 4D was version 2. In English, it was version 4, I think, in France. And I've enjoyed using it to develop for a long time, and many neat things with it. I also, to emphasize how exciting it's been for me to see the latest implementation since version 17 with Orta and so forth. I think the best way I could express that is because I had actually stopped actively developing with 4D by about V14. V13, I didn't do very much. And I maintained like a bronze level partnership. But once I learned about how the Orta, it was announced there, and then it made me so intrigued. There were so many wonderful things that were coming out that I decided to devote myself to figuring out how to use all of this here. So that's my short little thing. I'll start to share here. Share. Okay, so that's my theme. I got to move this window over. Keeping up with 4D's latest technology is a worthwhile endeavor, and I added the question why, because it can be quite exhausting. As was brought out, it's been coming out like a fire hydrant, and it also challenges all the ways that we did it for many years. It threatens our code base that we may have, that we perfected. I know for mine, when I would deploy an application server based and so forth, I wouldn't get calls for years to even do anything with it because it was so stable and perfect. So to decide to kind of jettison that is a big deal. But when I saw, as I mentioned about that announcement, you'll recognize this. There was a keynote, a short, I think 15 minutes or something, I guess 12 minutes by Thomas Mall, explaining the overview of how 4D was going to approach things. The entire database would be an object. There are multiple relations between data classes. You weren't stuck with a single current record anymore or current selection. And they revealed a plan in the masterclass there by Laurent. And it got me so excited that I just had to start experimenting with it myself. Now, this little post was very inspirational to me because it was one of the first ones about how simple it could be to implement things with Orta in a very simple data structure, programming, and so forth. And it deeply impressed me that this was the way to go. So this is how I reacted. I started to experiment with my own personal interest application. And then very conveniently, I was contacted by a company that I was referred by another client. They wanted to have an app. It was sort of similar to what I'd already done. So at first, the thought was to maybe retrofit my existing app. But I really, by this time, I had gotten experience with Orta and everything, and it just felt wrong to try to piece this over top of it. So thankfully, the customer was agreeable that I could just start. So I salvaged some code that I could. I put it into an application, and then I started doing. So since that time, my code base is totally new. I don't have any arrays except that if 40 commands require it, I convert them to collections most of the times. Use collections of objects, which are different. Basically, they replace groups of arrays. It makes everything simple. I don't use classic 4D code anymore. No process variables. I use the form object, which all of us do. No more interprocess variables. Got into storage, shared objects, and so forth. And so this is some of the things that I've done. Like I mentioned, I wrote my little kernel. I call it kernel because it can also be KERNEL. It's a kernel of code. And in there, I put support functions like all of you do. And I've made extensive use of subforms. Previous to Orta, that was a little tricky to me because you had to use so many process variables and so forth, and there was so much potential for collision if you're trying to make something generic. And so what I had resorted to was really having matching processes that would kind of hand off from one to another, hide and so forth, make it look like it was running just in one. So I've standardized and simplified a lot of things in my code. I'll show you some of that. Change the project mode. That was easy for me because it was entirely new code base. I understand it's complicated otherwise. And then I've extensively used the standard 4D classes, made my own and so forth. And so with classes, you'll notice up here on the right, I do quite a few of my UI related functions with them. So I have implemented in my combo boxes, a couple of this Finder widget I'm going to show you afterwards. I'll probably do a little tiny demo of this one. And I also have implemented what I call singleton objects. I had posted a blog, a forum query about how to do that. And there was a lot of good suggestions. Kisuki gave a suggestion that worked really neat for me. And maybe I'll get to share with how that works. This menu bar manager, this handles the system menu. This manages the menus and it cooperates with the menu bar manager. The switchboard is able to communicate messages between the client server and keep things synchronized. So this is my standard design policy. I hate spaghetti code. I have a strong commitment to generic programming. I believe that simplicity brings power. And if something seems that it's getting too complicated, I know there's something wrong with how I'm trying to do it. And something that's been very handy with the 4 since it's been active, and I truly appreciate this, is that if I get that sense when I'm working on something, it's too complicated, I will post a query on that. And within minutes or hours, someone's given insight and I understand how to do it more simply, and I truly appreciate that. And of course, modularity. I want it to be plug and play. I build subsystems. I want them to just integrate. In fact, I even want to forget how I even did it sometimes, which has happened. Some of my code in the past, I didn't remember how it worked because it was working for 20 years the same way. Something that's really come out, especially from Roland's presentation there, is a simplification through what polymorphism, leveraging object fields. And so I'm going to show you a little subsystem I made right at the beginning to make it simpler for me to keep track of object definitions and so forth. And because it was in V17, it uses terminology that later 4D ended up using itself. In the old days, I had actually done a little object-oriented programming thing with Mac4. So what this is intended to do is to help me to keep track of attributes of these different, what I called classes at the time. And so some of these are just object field layouts or definitions for different tables and so forth. But there's some that are very interesting. Oh, I should just point that out. So you notice that it's got nothing there. And then choice now, I have a little editor for it. So with my choice lists, I can create these. You probably recognize this works very well into turning into a hierarchical list. You basically have the key and the value. And then this here doesn't make much sense at this point, but later on other lists, I can actually set the privilege level, and then it's going to determine whether to make it available to the user or not. Yeah, so these are kind of typical things. And where they end up, let me just see if I show you where they end up. So they end up in storage, and you'll recognize these names are here. Here's the data types one, so that's the same as here. And all it becomes is just a list ref, and I do a stamp because if it gets updated, then it'd be number 2, and then the client would know that it needed to refresh that list. Now, it's not only those kind of lists that I have, I also have something I call an order list, which is where, oh, I moved it logically right below the other one. And in here, I've done this, well, this line is for basic query. You can see what it would find there by just going like that. And then the single selection thing is so that then in the trigger, I can determine if this record that's being saved belongs in this list or maybe has to be removed from the list. And that was the purpose of that. And then I just wanted to make sure I had my statements correct. So there it is. And so I just need to add it, and then I can, you know, set up my little things. And those order lists actually end up in that same storage .lists part as well. And it's actually maintained by a little mechanism I call a switchboard, where whenever there's an alteration saved on the server that impacts the list, then it will message the clients, and then the clients will just automatically update all that. Hopefully I'll get to show you that in a moment. This one is very fascinating, system menu. So I used to do my menus just with the built-in menu bar thing. And I remembered a number of years ago, it was actually advised to build your own. So, oops, sorry about that. How did I do that? I don't know what caused that. That is weird.
Curse of the demo.
Okay.
Yeah, aren't you contractually obligated to crash at least once?
Yeah.
Right. It wouldn't be live otherwise.
Okay, come on.
I've heard stories from some developers saying that V19 was a little bit less stable than 18 and 17, but I don't have any personal experience with that yet. You're running in 19 right now, aren't you, Chris?
Yeah, it's 19R3. Okay, come on. Okay, so we're back to here. Okay, system tool. I won't leave the screen now. So this is where I define my menus. And this just gives a little validation of how it's going to look. You can click on one of these, to take a look at it. And what I've done is I just have the method it wants to run, a parameter that I give it. This is helpful for me for some things if it's a standard action. And then here I can assign a privilege to it. So for instance, in here, for administrator, well, my developer, I just put it for me. And so it's only if I'm logged in that these options will end up going. But as I just, of course, I just define it, and then that ends up being in stored in storage. Pretty easy. And then is there, oh yeah, this was the other thing I want to show you about this, my little data class thing. So I wanted a way to be able to simplify things when I want to use them in list boxes. And the plan also is that if now that we have that form macros, is to try to make it so that I can automate some of the things I do when I make my input forms. I'll just show you what I mean. So these, I update it from the structure here if I want to, if I've made changes on there, and then it recomputes this. And in here you get to see there's just some standard things. The plan with this is to try to, it's an idea to what type of widget or whatever I want to create on my form macro when I eventually do that. And the other part here, you can, it has the formula for it and so forth. A little note for myself. I can also have a company. Okay. So I can also, I don't know why is it not showing there? Oh, because I'm not seeing it. I can assign a choice list to it. And so then what happens is when my list box creator guy is adding a new, you choose you want to add this value to it, then all these parameters help it to automatically do it mostly right. Oh, there's something else on that. With the relations, here, this is part of my deletion control thing, automated. So it's protected from deletion if this occurs where there's, say, orders that are connected to it, like many function. I can, for me, I can override it, being the designer, and force it to delete. But in here is where I specify which relations to also delete if that master record gets deleted. So I built that. Something else I have in here is for object fields. So you notice this is an object field. I have this little, sorry.
Quick question, Chris, quick question. Are you using 4D's deletion control with relations, or are you doing it with code?
I do it with code, and I have, it's very simple, I have to say, the way it turned out. I have it in my data store class, and it's like 4 or 5 little functions, and it just works. It works, it follows my logic, and yeah. So with these classes, objects, I can get it to preload, you know, according to ones I already have defined in my class definitions, or I can get it to add a single attribute if I need to do it like that. So in this case, the status object has all these options in it. And when the new record gets created, then this is automatically set up for me. And well, I guess I set it up. You notice these numbers are 600s. I had to come up with some number. These are computed attributes. And so I'm going to have to do aliases now that we have aliases. I didn't want to mess around with this so close to the demo in case, you know, what happens. But that's a plan to have aliases in there. And I also can set up a formula here. And I can give it a field number and stuff and put my little formula in here, give the details, and then it shows up there. I used to have it like that until the computed attributes came out, and then I basically removed those and replaced them with computed attributes. But so I can do a lot of things with that little guy. Now I want to show you what the data structure is behind it, because this is the main point of, well, to me, of showing you about this. And the data structure is that. So initially I always used to use IDs. I wish I would have used a UUID. It became very complicated afterwards to retrofit it, and I haven't gotten around to it. But all the attributes are stored in the class. And then the objects know which class they are. Of course, they can get configured because they can read the attributes. They know what is going to be in this object field here, attributes. And then they can also link. You know, they can be owned by something. So instead of having a massive data structure with, tables for my menus and for my choice lists and for all that stuff, all of that just fits right nicely into that package. I'm going to introduce this in a moment, but one of the neat things too with this, you'll notice I have a list box column. So this ends up being the template for one of those objects. And then I have a browser, which has the typical things. I call it browser because when I first implemented those kind of things, I use Area List Pro. And so I call them browsers. So I don't call them list boxes very much. But you notice it also has a collection of columns. So this is an LB column. So that's how 4D knows how to construct the object. I'll show you that in a moment here. Okay, so a couple of things with regard to this. I needed a couple of functions to make it easy, and this is where the class functions turned out really nice. So sometimes I just want a blank object based on the template in the UI class record. And so this is my simple little thing here. This just gets the class record, and then it analyzes its attributes and then constructs the blank object. And then sometimes I want it to be a defaulted one. And so this one is smart enough to check if there is a default in that attribute, it's going to load it instead. And so these two little functions get used quite a bit. And then for the inside that UI objects class, the data class, I just have this little function get all of the objects of that class. So if I want all the menus or whatever, I just give it that class name, sys menus, and then it gets me all the objects. Or I can do a lookup for a certain class and a name, and then I can get it. So simple. I love that. So here's a sample of how I use that .get default object. This is in something called a job. So in the job entity, I have an init config. I can give it an object that will load up certain attributes in the record. And I can also set attributes. So some things are just defaults, they're just, this is to get the new job status layout in this object field. So that's that get default object. I can set some attributes, and then I can also, this little function, which is in, a lot of this I included in a demo stuff for you, so you can play with it if you wish, it might be useful. But in this case, all this does is this is the current entity, the job record. And then I provided the seed that was given to me. And then what this does is it takes the values from the seed and store it into that. So for instance, if it's a related menu record, I can seed it with the master key, and then it will automatically just load up in that master key. I don't have to do too much fancy stuff. So I'll show you a little bit more about how I actually exploit this in a little bit here.
Oh, Chris, got another comment for you.
Mm-hmm.
Last line on this slide is an important line. When I was doing my beginning class work, I was trying to chain together a bunch of calls, and it wasn't working. And you need to do this if you're going to want to chain things together. It doesn't happen automatically. You got to do $0 : this if you want to chain things together. If you don't, then when you chain them together, it doesn't work. So just pointing that out for people that haven't done a lot of classwork yet. I think I've started including that in just about every class I ever write now, and it's functions. I always do that because I may need to chain them together.
Yeah, it's true. And it's Kisuke's, I hope I'm saying his name right. It was his sample document creator that tweaked me onto that. It took a while to digest how it was working, but then I never looked back. So another topic I wanted to just talk about is transitioning from project methods to using 4D standard, what I call data related classes. I guess 4D calls it that too. The data store, data class, selection, and entity. So here's an example of how I just recently did this as a little demo of this. We don't have an applied to selection. I don't think we do in Orda, but it's easy to do one yourself. I used to use that all the time. So here's the transition. So as a project method, you could easily make it like this. All you do is you loop through the records, you apply the formula. You just give it the entity selection and the formula, and it just works, right? So that's a base one. You could embellish it with support for the DK auto merge there, if you wish. So it's just modified to just compensate to use the mode. And then if you want to do it in 4D version 14, I hope that works, but I'm looking forward to experimenting with that ternary operator. So now you just have a project method at this point. But it would be more prudent to make it so that it could work in a dot notation setting where you have the entity selection and then apply the formula and the mode. And then you could even do it on a related selection, many records, and do it. So what do you need to do? Well, you need to implement it as this type of function for a data class. And you also want to do it in a way that you don't have to copy and paste the code all over the place. And anyway, where I say the main piece of the code should go is in the data store. So I'll show you how I do this here. So this is a function in the data store class. I just give it the entity selection, the formula, and the mode, and then it does the process. And then I keep swinging my head over because I have my camera right in front of my screen. And then you just apply it that way. But we can do better than that. I think apply to selection didn't really give you a way of knowing where it failed, if I recall. At least I never figured out how. But in Orda, you can find out what fails. So I've enhanced it here in this case to notice when the save didn't occur, to return that object, which tells you what happened, and add the entity to it so you don't have to the result, you know which entity it is, and then to return the errors, and then create my own result is true or else I return errors. So we have a better type of applied to selection function than 4D gave in its classic, I believe. I don't think there was a way to do that before. And so then, why don't we support formula strings instead of just a formula object? So that's very simple, especially since we have that very nice way of using variants and so forth, and we can actually modify the parameter if we wish. So in this case, if it's text, it converts it to a formula, and then it applies that. And then this is all the code we need in the entity selection class. This actually calls the data store, apply formula. This is in the data store class, and just supplies it with the entity selection, the formula we want, and the mode. But why do you have to stop with just selections? Collections are very similar. So why don't you have an apply to collections mode? I mean function. It's very simple. You don't have to test for if something failed or not. So that's a little suggestion I have there. And I have that sample code in my little demo for you. And then I decided, well, I could always make it so that this apply formula would work on either an entity selection or a collection. And I don't need to, because sometimes your work, like say you want to make this generic for a list box type of thing, the list box can be working on entity selection or it could be working on a collection. So I don't want to have to know if I should call apply to collection or apply to entity selection. So instead, I've modified it that this is smart enough to know. It can examine it. If it's text for the formula, it converts it again. And then if it's a collection, it calls this little guy. Otherwise, it does for the entity selection. So now you can use this little guy to work on a collection of objects or on an entity selection. So my question would be, wouldn't it be nice if it was a 4D a standard feature? Well, you can make your own, and maybe making it your own, you can make it more specific to what you need anyway. It could be a real value to it. Any questions about that?
No. Have you tried working with the collection to entity selection? I forget. It's from collection.
Yeah, I have a really neat method of I can create export files, giving it the entity selection or the entity, and it creates a JSON file. It keeps adding to it, and then I can just import it in, and it uses that entity to object and object to entity stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It's very nice. Here's another suggestion type of area, shifting from classic commands to ORDA compliant version. So 4D, it's understandable. They're doing so much. It's impossible to retrofit all the classic code, especially easily. But here are some sample converters that you can have, and it's in my sample here. I like to have the properties in a collection rather than in an array. So it's very simple, right? I can return the properties of an object. Sorry, it's an object as a collection, rather than having it as an array, because it typically this obget property names returns an array. So you can retrofit to make it work modern. And then when I said I don't use arrays, this is the only kind of time I do, is to retrofit stuff. And then this handy little thing I have in the demo too, obj get object characteristics, and this is the object name on a form. And then I can give it a constant. I just used the 4D pop constant editor to do that. And it returns an object that has the parameters, I've named them, but that apply to the choice. So if you want all, of course, it's going to get the whole thing. Otherwise, I can get the coordinates, I can get the font or whatever. And then there's a complementary method, this, which basically is the inverse of that. I can give it the form object name and the object that contains the characteristics. And actually, I think I also have this. Yeah, I have the choice. And then I think I have a typo here. But anyway, it will only set the ones that you've told it to in the choice. So if you just wanted to update the coordinates, it'll just do that or whatever. So that's what I like to do. I use these functions quite often in my code to manage positioning and so forth. And then I have something called form get. Oh, I have the get window info, which you can give a window ref and it will return information about it rather than 4D classic commands. And also to set it, you can actually position it with this, set the title and so forth with this little guy. And this form get, again, I use a constant, and I can give it a form name if I want, and maybe a page number. And then I have a couple different versions of it. If I want to get the entry order, it'll give me the entry order in as a collection of object names. If I want to find out the resizing aspects of, these are more the live forms, the forms that are actually active. And then these are more for stored forms, because you can get the property of a project form, or get a screenshot or whatever. So that's one of the types of areas that I've done quite a bit, is to make ORDA or dot notation or object-oriented type versions of stuff. Now, this topic about browsers and editors, I mentioned that I use that terminology. It's kind of like list boxes, but because I used Area List Pro before, I refer to them as browsers and editors. They're related, right? So the full collection is shown in the list box, and then you go into a certain one and it's used as an editor. So when I implemented this in the old days, I had to do it as a pair of complementary processes, where I would have the browser running in one process and its corresponding editor running in another, because I wanted to avoid collisions with arrays and process variables and the whole thing. But it's become so much simpler with V17 since then, especially with the form object. And so my purpose is to make it modular, to make it standard, so they just know their jobs, and then to keep it simple. I've been able to do it without using process variables, arrays, and all that stuff. It's wonderful. Now, this is the relationship, right? You have the browser and you have an editor. What I've actually done is I combined them all into one form. So I put the browser on the last page. In this case, it's page 2, and I put the editor on page 1. And they share the same entity selection. They operate on the same entities, and makes it really easy. During the forms onload, then the browser, the editors, and what I call UI widgets are configured. So once they're configured, I don't have to really worry about them. And I'll show you a sample there. Oh, I guess I've got to go into the code. I should just use some. Recognize that. Canon Smith's version. So in the 4Method, I just, in this case, I have combo boxes. I configure them. I configure the editor with different parameters, and then it just knows what to do. This is the main handler for my editors. It does everything. If I need to override anything, well, you know how to do that, intercept the event. And then on this form, this is what I call the browser. And in there is where I actually configured in the onload. This is my list box loader here. I'll explain it a little bit more afterwards. And then most of the code is in my LB panel handler. It just happens to do everything I need to do for handling list boxes. Now, I'm just going to go back to here, and then I'll get. So browsers are always, I have 2 subforms in my whole design. I have LB, which is what I call a main list box. And then I have LB list for handling related records. And I store the configuration in the UI objects entity. And I've designed it, with my GUI and so forth. The editors, they can either be on a special page on the form, like I showed you, or they can be in a subform. And an editor can control any number of related browsers. I'll show you that in a dramatic demo shortly. And they can also have and these browsers have their editors. The editor can manage my UI widgets automatically and so forth. Now I'm going to show you how I actually configure I guess if I go to here. So you'll notice this form, this is the LB form. And it doesn't have any, it just has a single column because you have to have one. And then when it actually displays here, it's got them all. So the way that I do it is I just put this onto my company form, and then I open it up, and then I just add what I want to it. If for some reason I want that, then I have it in there. I can redimension, move it around, whatever. And I don't want to have that version. And something else I have, which only shows up when it's me, is I have this little gear, and I can go like this, and then I can specify the fonts I want and all this. The purpose of this was back when we had to make our own styles, I did, but now it's CSS, I have to rethink that. I don't want to use the old technology. And if I change these things, then of course that's a Windows one. You see how it shows a visual of what's happening up here. So that's how I configure my appearance on these things. And then I could just save or cancel or whatever, set the number of columns to lock and so forth. So this is how I program my list boxes for their appearance. Something else I can do is, you notice how right now I can click on these. If I want, I can disable that by making it non-enterable. And now you can't do anything. It becomes just part of a double click. I don't know why that artifact is on there. So I can turn these on or off if I need to. And I also have some nice little things where if I want to select a bunch of them and I want to make them say uppercase, I just go like that. It knows which columns to do because I'm clicking in that column. And then and these are all kind of standard things. If I want to find a certain one, I just start to type it. And it auto scrolls to it. And that's all done with just this one form. So just a recap here. So I have it on my little slide to remind you where to, well, I guess you're not going to get to use this because I never included it, but sometimes it's a good idea for, to know if someone else is doing it, and then they can try to harvest what they can there. So I just have typical things. The decorator is just to set the, I never even showed you that. I could set the column title if I want and so forth. The way that I do it is I use because these are subforms and they have to use messages. And so then I just do messaging between this browser and the form. and just let it know the things that it needs to know. So if you double click on it, then it would send an event to the container object, and then the container object knows how to handle it. Some of that is automatic in my code too. Sorry about being so fast. Something else I have in there is I saved the window position. So if I drag it around, it'll save it locally on the client. With my editors, this is all the functions, or I should say the project methods I have with it. So it's not a very big collection. The editors know how to do the load and save the entities. I support like an on load and on save thing. So that keeps it generic or modular. And in the editors, I have standard button panels. I can, in the configuration, tell it which ones I want to have active or not. So they'll just hide and reposition if they need to. And I also have this little, I call it a navigator, and that's just a subform. So I'm just going to show you this. I didn't have lots of time to put this together, so some of it is. Okay, yeah, this will just show you how complicated this can manage. So here's a job record. We made it so that everything could be managed on here. Now, every single one of these are an LB list that I've configured, like I showed you. So I just pop them on my form, and then I open it up, and then I configure it how I want. And so this is a browser. If I double click, oh, I guess it's already opened up. This one actually controls this area. So the browser can control an editor that's on the same page. These ones, the editor just replaces it. It's a subform. And I can pop these things up. Maybe show you more about that later. This is a standard thing too. I have a librarian. So it's like 2 lines of code or something, and then I can make the librarian work with other stuff. So all of these, they just pop in, pop out. And the way I did that, this form, you see, these are all just the LB lists. I put the subforms down here because I don't want them in the way. And then in the onload, and these are invisible, so it will position it where it's supposed to appear later. And then the browser just knows when I double click it, it knows where the editor is, that it's a subform, it pops it up where it's supposed to be. And so that's a mechanism that's being used. And I put my subforms down here so they're not in the way. I don't have to superimpose them. And they just, it's a one-liner type of code to position them when it's on runtime. This little part this is part of another thing I'm going to be showing you in a little bit. Yeah. So now I'm going to demonstrate something that I'm making available to you. Here.
Chris, I assume that this is an actual in production project that you're showing us here. This job.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing with project mode, and I want to point this out too. Thanks for bringing that up. So let me just show you something as an example. So this is a list of my methods, and the blue dotted ones are used in all my projects. So if I make a change in this program, and then I just have to update that on my other project. So I keep it synchronized, and it's the same thing with my classes and all the other, and my forms. Many of the forms are used, you know, everywhere. So I really like that part about 4D, where they, with project mode, makes it really easy to do that. Okay, so this is going, I'm going to use a different thing to demonstrate here. I guess I could bring up my little blurb. Date entry widget. So you may have discovered that the standard 4D offering isn't complying with objects. And I understand why, because it's really hard to get it to work with an object as a data source. I had to come up with a special trick to be able to manage that. But right now, what you would have to do if you wanted to use the standard 4D widgets is you have to use a process variable. And then you have to load that variable, you know, retrieve from it and put it in your record. And I don't want to deal with that. So what my goal was is to have one where I could just give it sort of like this. I give it what I wanted to operate on, you know, this entity, the entry date attribute on it, and just have it work. I wasn't able to quite get it like this, but that was the idea. So, whoops, it went backwards on me. Okay. I wanted it to work directly on the attribute. I didn't want to use a single process variable because I wasn't comfortable with that in a component, because it's in a component. I didn't want to have any collisions. But the problem is that because it's a subform, whatever object you give as its data source becomes its form object. And you can't use that form object to store your day and all the other things, because you'd be storing it in the entity. Like, it just doesn't work. So that was the problem. So what I had to figure out a different way to store these datums that operated in the widget. So what I did, I actually created an object variable on my form, and I store the stuff that I need in that object variable. So I don't have to use the form object to keep track of the date and all the other stuff that this component requires. I just store all those values in this object field that's on the widget. And then I retrieve it using get pointer. I know you can use object get value now. I haven't updated it. And that's how I ended up storing, without using the form object, all the little things I needed to keep track of. And then for the data source, I give it just as much of the path as leads up to the attribute. In this case, the en edit record. And then I have to put this little piece of code in the widget on the form. And then it tells it it's a call date. That's how I ended up having to do it. And so the effect of it is it operates directly on that attribute without affecting any other things. Very innocuous. I'm pretty proud of how that turned out. So this is, you're going to see this in the little demo I'm providing here. But this is, I'm just going to show you this exactly on the program. And of course, it showed up somewhere else. Where did it show up? Oh, there. And I'll explain that forms in the setup here. So here is a little widget. This is the date entry one. And then this is the calendar one, good call. And every time it beeps, as I mentioned here, it's sending a message to the container here, this container object, that the date's been changed. And that way you can real time react to what the user is doing. You could update a schedule, whatever other elements you have on the screen. That's the whole point of it. So every time it beeps in this demo, it's because I've told it to beep in right here. It's got a message update event, and so it beeps. So what you would end up doing is you would put whatever code you want in there. And then this is what I said, the onload is very, very simple. You just copy and paste this object and it's done. But you can customize what you want it to do. So here's a little demo. So you hear the little beeps. I can navigate between them by tabbing, shift tabbing. I can use a right arrow, left arrow. I can use the up arrow to go, change that value. So I love keyboarding. I don't like having to click all the time. So the other thing, if you want it to be today's date, you just type a T and it sets it today's date. To bring up the calendar, you can either click on this button or you can just tap the C and it loads up that widget. Now I can navigate with this left and right. Right keeps going one more day. Left goes back a day. It's not beeping right now because I assume that the person's just locating the date that they want. And then they'll carriage return or something when they actually have it. If I want to go a month ahead, I hold down the command key and write. Oh, I went and got myself off. Okay. Well, it's supposed to. Well, it's working for the year up, year back, and year forward, with just holding the command key and hitting the up and left, up and down arrows. It's supposed to go from month to month with the left and right. So if you were entering this and you wanted to enter a date that was, a few months ahead, you should be able to just hold down the command key. I played with this and I committed the cardinal sin before a demo, is change something. But you're supposed to be able to hold down the command key, tap, or control key on Windows, tap the right and it'd go to the next month, just like this would, right? And then when you accept it, then it updates and beeps. So that's how that little thing works. I just have, this is a little blurb of it, gives you the shortcut keys. And
This is included in the demo, Chris?
yeah, I've been wanting to share this for a while, so.
Well, thanks so much for doing this. I've been wanting to write this code for a long time, but it's too lazy. So thanks for doing it. I'm going to use it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's what I want to hear, because if you do these things and no one really uses it, then you feel like, what was the point of that, of sharing, right? Because it takes a lot of effort to do that. The other way this is configured is here. I give it the next, the name of the next object I want it to go to when it leaves this widget. So in this case, when it leaves this widget, it's going to go to this one. That way I can control rather than let 4D. The entry control thing sometimes is hard to manage for me. So with this if you wanted to show as a little calendar, then this works similar. When you click, it's sending that message event. But of course, when you're just going through, it doesn't, because you haven't picked the date. but as soon as you pick a date, then it'll work. And if you hit the carriage return like I just did, so I just navigated, then I want that date, carriage return, and I get the event. And so in that, all you'll be doing, just set this up correctly. This part is all the same. It just, this is the name of the so-called entity. What I did on the form, I just created like a fake little entity thing. So you notice the form picker is pretending to be an attribute set to the current date, just to demo that, but normally you wouldn't be doing that. There's just one other little thing with it. I'm just seeing if I have it in. We might not have noted. If the entity changes that this is working on, the attribute of it, the widget doesn't automatically update. But all you have to do when you load a new entity is just send one, call one command, I think it's isdate refresh or something, and then it'll just refresh. So these are the methods, or sorry, project methods, yeah, for it. And then this is how you get it to refresh. You just call that, and then it'll refresh the widget display when you've changed the entity. So how I mentioned that I got the to be able to store the values I needed by using the object variable on the form. So this is everything that's involved in that little form. This is the where all my interim datums, or whatever you want to call it, variables are stored, is in this object variable on the form off screen. And then when I need to access it, you'll notice on, let's see, any of these, this is where how I get at it, just because it's called form data. And so I retrieve that object, and then I just manipulate it here. These are some of the parameters that are on there. So that's a little trick. If you need to make a component and you want to, well, a widget component, and you want to avoid messing around with the form object, then do that. So I'll change gears here. Coding suggestions. So this is kind of how I got to really think about with the ORDA and everything. I think of my application as like a company, and I'm the CEO. And I want to define my organizational structure, right? The code structure. I hire workers. There's some permanent, there's some temps. I have managers at different levels. The data classes are a very excellent manager of the information they store. Of course, entity selections are like a sub-manager under there that control entities. And then I have custom classes. They operate, they manage things, right? And then my workers, like entities, are sort of like a worker there. And so I tried to assign the work out to the correct worker. What I mean with this is that instead of thinking of it as code that operates on data, I want to make it think more like a worker, a guy who operates and he knows his own business. So for instance, in mine, I have I want to make all my guys good employees. I want to teach them the skills they need to manage themselves. So if it's an entity, I want to teach it how to manage itself. If it's a data class, I want it to do its own job. And then if if one worker guy needs him to do something, he just has to send him a message and he gets and brings it back to him, right? You delegate it. And I found it's very easy to do with 4D the way it's modernly done now. So the question is, where do we place the code? Well, try to put it with the worker that's most responsible and most capable, and then make them able to interact with the other objects, other things in your code. So for instance, in my code, I have the units and workers, they have schedules. And so all the code for managing their schedule is in their data class. And they know how to operate and do themselves. And then I should say it's in the entity. So the worker knows his own schedule. And so I get it to share its own schedule. This is a typical kind of thing I do with the unit entity. I have an init config I showed you before. I use this little thing to know if it's a valid record or not, because sometimes people hit the close button instead of cancel, and they could create blank records. So I just have that little thing in there. And then here is examples of the unit telling stuff about itself, what its status and so forth is. And then in my data class, and you'll see this, I have a little demo of that in the sample I'm giving. I have a new entity instead of .new, it's .new entity. I can give it a seed, and then it will call the entity to do the configuration. It passes on the seed to the entity does the work. You can trace that. I'm going to go really fast because this one's more exciting. This is the other little release thing. Okay. Is a new Finder widget. So it has some ability to change its appearance depending on the settings that you give it. But basically, it's a subform you put in. It uses a list box plus an opaque box. I got this idea really from a few other devs that figured out how to do this. I just compiled it together on this. And then this is the standard script for it. It again receives events. If the user selected a record, then this runs. And if they canceled, that runs. So I never really spent a lot of time getting this part with any. I ran out of time actually. So I'm just going to demo. I just want to hide everything else. I think it's this, no, wrong one. I don't know why isn't the 4D menu going up there? I have 3 screens, so okay. So here's a little thing. This is showing that when you go into this, it can be configured to show you the list right off the bat. You don't have to show it, but you can go up and down it if you want. In this case, it's searching by contacts or name or company. So if I know the person's name, I start to type it. If I know they're from a bank, right? And you notice the different colors, it's because there's different levels of match. So let's just go through that a little bit. In this case, the match is on the name. That's a first level match. In this case, it's on the last name. It's kind of like a second level match. And then I guess there's not any more there. And so what I'm able to do with this widget, if you want, you can configure it to show a different color depending on the relevance of the match. And if I want to see, I've typed clearly, now it's got all the people that are there. This is showing some of the details from it. If I tab, it's the active record, but I can also get at the entity selection. So if you have this, it's really neat, and I want to do this at some point soon, is to have a live query editor where it's figuring those things out as the person types it. I had that before in my classic code. In this case, the company, I just know it's in Edmonton. So I just start to type Edmonton. I know it's in Calgary. These are people that are related to it, so it's showing how it goes. And in this case, I'm searching the companies, but I'm checking the contacts. So maybe I just want to find out, this is kind of a crazy thing, but I had a better example of this. Sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to search for this person. And you notice she shows up on the list. I know she's with here. And then I can tap. Now this is maybe not useful, but it just shows how flexible this thing is. And then something that might be more standard, right? You just want to search your companies. I'm just typing away. Corporation. And I know lots have implemented this. The beauty of this one is that you have multiple levels of criteria, any number of levels of criteria that you want. You can have them color differently depending on the type of match it is. So this is a top level match, it's black. Here it's in the name here, right? It's not starting from the beginning, so it's a secondary match. It can also be a match on the city instead. So here, this is another level. It's a tertiary match. It's a third level match. You may or may not need to do that, but for me, it's really handy at times. So I'll just show you how this is implemented really quick, because you're going to be able to play with it anyway. So actually, I'm going to show you the data. It's implemented using classes. And there's 3 classes. There's one for the column, which just configures this. This is a column, that's a column. So there's one class that configures a column. There's one that's the actual little finder guy. And then this finder group more operates them. That way I didn't have to have a bunch of duplicated stuff in there. You configure it in the onload. I just tell it the columns I want. The formulas that I want for each level. So this is level 1, level 2, 3, 4. Of course, put them all together. Oh, these are the colors and the formula. And then this is the command that creates the class, the object. I used new finder because it's, and that's the only way you can share them out of a component, you know. But I also provided it right here, so you could just copy these right into your main. So you can see you only got 3 things you got to copy to have it. And then you just follow this pattern of the configuration. You do your columns, the formulas, the colors and whatnot. These I just have as constants. And then that's what's done, the configuration all, and then you don't even have to know what you do after that. And then in this code here, for the widget, this operates it. This is what I call the finder group, the controller. This is the name of that object, and then it just does it. And then it tells you if there's anything you need to know.
Well, it seems like a very handy tool, and it'll be great for everybody to get a look at the actual source code for these components or these classes that you're sharing. But it's yeah, it's a lot of information to unpack here, but definitely a good demonstration of the use of the new language capabilities and extensive reliance on the subforms and sort of compartmentalizing different functionalities for reuse. And no, it's definitely a lot of interesting functionality that you shared. It's interesting how far you've been able to take the two tables in the in the structure for your original demo there, and how rich of an interface you're able to build just based on two tables, interface and data storage. It's this is definitely a lot of great stuff in this meeting. It's just now that we're done here, I was wondering if anybody had any quick questions for Chris as we're wrapping up.
Chris, you said that you had sort of stopped 4D development for a while and you were using other tools. Do you have other object-oriented languages in your background?
Well, I've always thought that was a way to go. Xcode is really pretty cool because what I like to do with part of that time, I wasn't actually doing coding. I was using my programs to do work. Like I was making materials for trade shows and stuff like that using the programs that I had built. So I didn't have active coding I was really needing to do in 4D. But also, it just seemed like it had become quite complicated. The way I like to do it with generic and that, it was complicated to do it. I felt like I was bumping against the edges too much. But with the form object and with all these other features we got, it just got me excited to use 4D for all of it. I don't know if that answers it very well, but
no, that answers it just fine. And how you said you picked it up again in V17, so it's really been the last couple of years.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. One thing I want to show you at some point, I've done something really exciting, is I basically can create dynamic forms through programming using a template and so forth. So sometime I'll maybe get to show you that. But the whole class structure, I love it. All the code is compartmentalized. It's all related. I don't have to remember which, I don't have to name my project methods, but some, I'll be this, I'll be that, to group them. It's all just in the class.
Well, no, it's I think we'll definitely have enough for a second meeting at some point.
Sorry for getting you all tired. I'm sure I realize I tried to show you a lot of stuff at once, but anyway, I appreciate the value that I've gotten the last few years from the 4D forum, and I'm glad that we don't use that INUG emailing stuff, because I never did get into that. I couldn't see how you could explain what you needed through 1,000 words. But since 4D's made the forum available to us and the blogs, and it feels like I'm getting a real value from my 4D partnership now, and I just want that to continue. And so with so many of you have helped me out through forum questions and that, I wanted to give something back, and I think these widgets and some of the other little things I have in the goodies bag might do that for you.
Yeah, no, it's it's been nice to have the forum sort of that discussion consolidated into the 4D forum. There's obviously other channels as well, but you know, it's good to have all the international discussion in one place, despite, you know, language challenges and whatnot. But you know, it's yeah, there's a lot of great tips in there, and I know that Chris is has been in a lot of conversation and really running with the new capabilities that we've been given in recent versions. Well, thank you, Chris. It's a great demo of your code base there, and I think we'll all be excited to take a look at the code that you'll be sharing. Will you should we put up links to that in this post, or is there
Well, Christophe Flement was so kind to give up his spot, but I only had a couple weeks to do this, so I just ran out of time. But I want to make it as a GitHub, and there's a couple of requests I have. Because once you have this, you can, of course, customize. You could have different appearance for the Finder thing than I do, and that. If you do make some modifications, I would really appreciate receiving it back. And you know, I don't feel like it's only my baby. If you find a way to make it nicer looking or more options or whatever, I would be happy.
Yeah, well, it'd be great
Yeah.
to get it in GitHub or something like that, and then maybe update. There's a forum post that I created for this meeting, and maybe if that could be updated with any development materials or links, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
So,
I'll get that to you as soon as I can. As I was going through this, I was discovering some little improvements I wanted to make in the code, so that's why I ended up not putting it up
oh, cool.
soon.
Well, thanks again. I'm just going to mention a little bit about our next meeting, and give some people their time back. The next meeting we have here is on March the 2nd. It's the best of the NPM world in 4D. A name that might be familiar to some, Aparajita Fishman. So he's another big name in 4D development and web development with 4D since many a year. But again, we have open dates April 13th and May 25th. So please do reach out with any ideas you might have for those meetings. And check out our schedule at 4dmethod.com/schedule. Another big shout out to the supporters for the 4DMethod at Patreon. You guys are awesome, and it helps everybody, helps me to reserve time for putting this all together and scheduling everything and all the effort that it takes. So if there's any other discussion or questions for Chris or comments, now's the time. Otherwise, we can take it offline or online elsewhere. Well, anyways, thanks again, Chris, and thanks again to everyone at 4D, and to Kirk for chatting a little bit about the happy hour. Hope to see you all there.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Brent. Thank
All
you,
right.
Chris.
All
Thank
right.
you, gentlemen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for your patience. I'm very long-winded.
No
Thank you.
worries.